fear is bigger in our mind than it is in reality. So when the manager decided to resign, she said this to me. She said that I will never be able to follow you as a leader because you are someone who lead with your head and not your heart.
I don't take care of my A team that much because the A team can work, right? They don't complain. Not to come across as a complainer, but to look at every such moments to be an opportunity to have conversations. Hello. Hi, welcome to Building Better Leaders podcast with Kausern Hieu. Today, you're in for a treat. We've got a very good friend here accompanying me today to tackle some of the letters that you have written in, 3 letters specifically. So for those who are uninitiated, who are not too sure what's this going on, so what we are doing here is that you have written in leadership challenges that you're going through in the workplace, and you would like to be able to have some kind of perspective to the challenges. Think of it like an advice column, but for leaders, right? So a little bit about my guest / companion for today, Eileen, how she has actually changed my life and kind of like impacted my self-worth actually. So strangely, I was trying to recall when was the first time I met Eileen, and I realized it was a very long time ago. Not to reveal your age, but it was about 20 years ago at Starcom. I think all of you, you were really young at the time, and I just joined the agency, and you were with this cool kids gang. I always recall, and I was this nerd, somewhere at the corner.
The secluded gang.
The nerd doing digital stuff, and you were the cool gang, that kind of thing. Then after that, we kind of like. You left to do something else. Left to other agencies and all. And we reconnected again actually pretty recently, about like 5 years-ish ago, right? When we were serving in the Malaysian Digital Association. And I recall very clearly that when we were there for the AGM meeting, in this case, the first time we were there, and you approached me, and I was like, it wasn't very prepared of what you're going to ask me, but you were very kind. You asked me about leadership stuff. You were asking me about, why am I passionate about developing young leaders? Why this, how you do it, and so on, right? And I was very taken aback that the very fact that you took interest in what I did. So I really appreciated you for that. And coming from somebody who is a veteran, in a very good way, in the industry, right? People look up to you, and for you to be able to ask me those questions felt very personal in a very good way, and it wasn't just one time, and you were very consistent about it, even till when I left the MDA in this case to pursue my own thing last year. The last conversation you had with me during the farewell dinner was also about leadership stuff, to say like how you can help out in the MDA and what you can do for the agency that you were taking care of and so on. So it's and the good thing is that when I did something for your agency, and the testimonies that I get was very consistent the testimonies from the people was very consistent. And if I can summarize it, in essence, you straddle very well with paradoxes, in this case, that, like some people say that, oh, this person is very results driven, not very caring and so on. And some leaders say that, oh, this person is very relationship driven, but, not so good in results. But you can do both, right? So the people that have been giving the kind of testimonies have been seeing that, Eileen, she drives results. She's hard in this case, but at the same time, she also stretches me. She pushes me. She challenges me, and so on. And I grow a lot under her leadership. And it's been consistent. There's the same message across the different people which I meet, and I'm blessed to be able to have this kind of friendship with you. And I appreciate you coming over to have this conversation, to assist me in tackling some of these letters that's coming in. So that's Eileen. But for those who do not know you, Eileen, can you please introduce yourself?
Okay, well, firstly, I think a lot of times the people always like to see a lot of positives. I think the journey that I would have been, I think, it's not without, I would say, the cheerleaders around me, as well as the people who would have empowered me along the way to, navigate lah. I think I think what Kausern kind of give a very, I mean, like I'm very, very honored and very, very humbled by, what you've just kind of summarized about me. But there were moments, I think this is not who I am, to where I am today. But I think moments in the journey where I have lost, I would say, lost it, in a sense when it comes to leadership. And I think I would never give those moments back because it is how it helps to shape me to where it is today. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so a little bit of what you do.
Yes, so I'm Eileen, and today I am the PhD Asia Pacific CEO. I have been with Omnicom for almost 9 or 10 years now, and I have kind of grown with the organization. But a true agency person, stumbled into this industry, and I always use the word stumble because it wasn't really my first choice. And that proves that things can change, right, over time, and that we shouldn't ask ourselves these what if questions. But stumble into the industry, didn't really want to be in media, to be honest. Wanted to be a strategist. But along the way, I find my love for all things that are changing, and I find that media as an industry is always at the forefront of the change. So,
Yeah.
so here I am still in the industry.
Okay. Thanks for the introduction. I do miss a little bit about the industry, but when I think back about some things about it, then I tend to like, okay, maybe I should just stick to my current lane right now. Okay, let's tackle the first letter that we
Mm.
received. So let me read it out. Dear Building Better Leaders, I'm in a leadership role, but some days I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. I second guess myself constantly. Was that the right call? Did I come across as confident enough? Should I have spoken up more in that leadership meeting? So on and so forth. So everyone around me seems so sure of themselves, so fluent in leadership language. I often feel like I'm just trying to keep up, saying what I think I'm supposed to say. My team seems to respect me and I've gotten positive feedback here and there, but inside I keep waiting for someone to realize I'm not as strong as a leader as they think. How do I quiet this imposter voice and show up with more confidence? So, any thoughts before I provide some of my pointers?
For me, I think imposter syndrome is there. And we have to recognize it that it's there. It's how we are aware of it and what we do about it that actually truly matters. And there's no such thing where when we are 70 years old, we do not have imposter syndrome. Or when we are even 10-year-olds. I see my son go through that and he has doubts as well, sometimes, and that comes in. So that's only human. Is the probably the only thing I would add, and then maybe I will add on after Carlson, you kind of share your thoughts.
Okay. Again, same thing. I would just like to acknowledge the letter writer that imposter syndrome is normal, right? I would like to be able to normalize that it is. And the very fact that even though one is being promoted several times, it will not go away. And like what you said, it is really how you manage it in this case, right? And I think also for those, because the letter writer said, that in looking around, they seem to be everyone seems to be able to have it, but I don't have it. Just to assure you that the people around, even though they could be loud, may not necessarily have it as well. It could be overcompensating for something which they may not have. So before I get into some pointers, I'm just wondering, were there moments in your leadership journey where you did kind of doubt yourself, and how do you go about overcoming it, like you said?
Yeah, many times, to be honest. In fact, every time I change job, imposter syndrome will come in. And I've had it since when I first started working, where either you get maybe a negative comment, say, oh, the deck was not as good, then you know, the imposter syndrome comes in, because you may have put your heart and soul, and then you thought, wow, I think I produced quite a really, really good work, and then someone tells you it's not. You kind of then really go into this self-doubt situation. So many moments. I think one very, very defining one for me, which I kind of told this story quite a fair bit, was when I had to take over a team, and the team was very, very close to the previous boss. Okay. And that point in time, the boss was actually the one who appointed me to take over the team when she was departing. Now, but I have a very different style. I think you alluded to that to say I am quite task and results oriented, but I do focus in terms of the people. I think at that point in time when I was a bit younger, I was a lot more task oriented in that regard. And for me, I am a believer of, keep your close friends close, but I don't need 500 friends, that kind. Uh, so I think people who meet me now, they will feel like, hey, that's a bit quite different from where Eileen is. So yeah, so the one big defining moment I think at that point in time was when the manager who was reporting into me decided to resign. And I have been quite tough on the team because I was pushing for really strong quality work. And I felt that at that point in time, we felt like it was a little like a bit too nuanced, great relationship with the client, but we were not really pushing the boundaries in terms of the work that we were doing. So when the manager decided to resign, she said this to me. She said that I will never be able to follow you as a leader because you are someone who lead with your head and not your heart. And it was really painful to hear. And that day I went home and I cried because I was like, firstly, you kind of go through a bit of and I think when we have to realize that we go into a roller coaster journey when this happens, right? When imposter syndrome comes in, it was my first gig as a team lead, meaning an account lead. And that was a big blow, I felt, for me. So you went into denial first. Most often than not, we always go to denial and we become super defensive and we put the blame on someone else, right? So I went through that. I went home, I cried, and I go, what do you mean not with my heart? Well, I work very long hours. I'm thinking a lot about all this, da 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 da, and I'm pushing all. Then and most often than not, I think people stop there. If they stop there with just only denial and defense, you build a block, you build a barricade where you cannot self-learn. And for me, I think that was a bit of a pivotal moment because I then went into a bit more of a reflection moment and asked myself to go, I know I do care about the people, but maybe I was not showing up in the right way. And if you really think about when you're in the denial stage, I just repeated it just now, like, what do you mean I don't care? Da 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 da. I did all this, da da da. How many I's were there in that sentence? It was all about what, I care. I care what? What do you mean I don't care? I have been doing this, I've been doing that. And it's a very common stage because that's what we are all humans. We go in, it's our mechanism for survival. We protect ourselves first, so we become defensive. That is only natural. We have to recognize that we go into this state and we have to allow ourselves to also feel it. I think there's no perfection. You cannot go, oh, we are not defensive. It's okay. Be defensive because you need to feel the hurt. You need to feel the emotions.
Yeah.
But you need to get on to the next stage, I think. And that was where self-reflection came in. And I thought I really calmed down. By then, finish crying, everything. Take a few days, simmer about the whole thing. And really reflected and start thinking to go, yeah, maybe the team's not feeling it. Maybe because I wasn't communicating my intention. Maybe because I was showing up in like, oh, you got to do this. It's like really, really hard, and not being empathetic to think about how they are struggling to kind of drive that, right? And for me, till today, I think I will take this lesson to grave lah. Because while it was very painful to hear it, in my view, right? But it was a big pivotal moment because it changed the way I led, to be honest, from then on until today. And maybe that's where it's gotten to a point where, yes, I am result oriented. I've always been result oriented, but it has now led me to rethink how I need to do it and bring people along that journey and tell them that, yes, I am pushing you because I know you can do more, because I have faith that you can. And don't worry, I will not let you fall. I will be that pelampong one. I will, but I'm going to push you until you need the pelampong. Kind of a mantra, and I now communicate it more, to be honest. So
Wow.
yeah, so that was, I think, a big shift in the way I changed my leadership after that.
Let's just gonna to push a little bit more here. You know, a lot of people when they are in the denial stage, they blame and and so on and so forth. But not a lot of people would have that kind of self-reflection and
Yep.
to be able to rethink. How does one able to move into that stage, right? To be able to self-reflect
Mm.
and to say, okay, let's reframe this, let's rethink this again, and what are the new actions that I need to be able to take? What, yeah, any advice for somebody who is actually kind of stuck there?
Yeah. To be honest, if I ask myself at that point in time, I also do not know how lah. But now that maybe after years of kind of having gone through a few, situations,
Yeah.
um, I do think that it requires one innate skill set, which
Yes.
is the mindset to learn. Like if you have that mindset to learn, you will you will be more aware in some moments that you start to push yourself to go, is this a learning moment? Um, and I think for me, ever since I was young, I have been a very curious person. I love learning, which is why I stay in this industry because I mean, from the time where I had to do TV spots, cross checking, to
What
where
is
today,
TV?
yeah, I mean, like what? Like when I first started the job, they gave me a hard copy piece of paper, asked me to spot the missing spots on TV. I was like, wow, it's damn boring all this job. To today, we are talking
Yeah.
about agentic AI and thinking
Yeah.
about how we need to work hand in hand in AI. I mean, I don't think I can ever imagine this world to be so different, right? So I think for me, ever since young, I do have that hunger to learn. Like I have the innate characteristics of really just wanting to learn and curious enough. So I do encourage people to build that in mindsets. We always talk about fixed and growth mindsets,
Yeah.
and and then we always say, yeah, I got growth mindset or I got growth mindset. But actually, it's a real question to ask yourself: do you really,
Yeah.
really have growth mindset, right? And it's okay to say no and then start to learn that. So I would maybe say that is probably where it pushes me to go, okay, you already feel it, you already cry, you already feel, you will go a few emotions from crying to
Yeah.
anger to whatever kind of emotions. And then after that to take time to reflect about it. Lah.
Can I just add on? Also knowing you, and also observing what you just said. I think beyond the hunger to learn, the other thing that helped you to switch is the very fact that you have empathy.
I have empathy.
Yeah, empathy. Yeah,
A lot of times
I mean,
at the younger stage, people feel that I don't have lah. But
yeah, the very fact that that statement that this junior or this manager said to you was so hard, right? That you had an emotional reaction to it, and
yeah.
that shows that you care, that you
Mm,
have empathy, right? So because of the filters of having empathy and the head knowledge, or at least the objectivity of saying that, okay, can I learn something from this?
mm,
Together with that, then what happens is that then you say, okay, I allow myself to wallow in self-pity, whatever. Then okay, now what can I do? And the very fact that having those values anchors you, right? The intent is still the same, but the
mm,
method can change.
yeah.
right? So that's where you say, okay, maybe, like you said, I was a bit too hard, maybe I didn't communicate it very clearly, and so on. So I think that is something which probably the letter writer needs to also consider, in this case.
Yeah, and I also want to make it clear that it wasn't like I realized it already and then it's like 180-degree change,
Sure,
you know. I mean,
sure, of
it
course.
took years to get to where it needs to be today. And there are moments still where I might be very task oriented because that's the most comfort level, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I also want people to understand that yes, while I came to the realization, it wasn't like phew, I could just automatically make that change, right? And I think coming back to the letter, in terms of imposter syndrome, like we all, like for me when I first gave birth, I was struggling juggling, right? And I had massive imposter syndrome as whether I am a mom, like a good mom and those kind of things. I think what we need to realize, and maybe a bit of a word of advice for the writer, is to go. It's okay to ask yourself why you are having these questions in your head, right? And find what could possibly be sometimes the root cause of things. Is it because you feel that you don't deserve the position? Because sometimes there are bigger areas that are emerging as behaviors or thoughts, but there might be more root cause to certain things. For example, I fundamentally, when I became a mom, felt that women cannot juggle both. Fundamentally, it was a
Wow.
fundamental belief. And why did I have it? Was because when I grew up, my mom was a career person and I saw what she had to sacrifice. So it became an inbuilt, and I saw the challenges she went through as well, where, like, comments that are being made to her. And then it became inbuilt to go, yeah, it's actually, it's not possible. Then when I became a mom, you, without realizing it, you are self-sabotaging yourself because you fundamentally had a belief. And I had to get through it as well. And it wasn't easy. Like I still, now I think much better, but when my kids were younger, there were a lot of these unnecessary comments that I received as well, that I really had to keep processing in my own way to try and manage my own imposter syndrome as I was going through that.
Thanks for sharing. I guess like how we just started out with this letter. I think we're all humans. I think I'm not too sure whether some people that who knows Eileen actually have heard of this side of the story. And I really appreciate you for sharing that. You know, so I think the other thing that the letter writer can consider is to reframe how imposter syndrome can be a strength
Mm.
for them as well, right? For this person. So I think one person which I do look up to, or I do read a fair bit, is the former PM of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, right? And she's very famous for leaning into her imposter syndrome.
Yep.
How does she make it into a strength? And in fact, she just released a book called A Different Kind of Power, right? Which is
Oh.
an amazing title, right? And she's a very empathetic, human-centric. So there's three things which she shared, which was very interesting about leaning into that strength. So the first one is that the very fact that she is not very clear or not very sure about certain things pushes her to want to know more things, right? To
Mm.
prepare better in this case, so that she will feel less imposter in this case. The second thing that she will do is also she will then um, learn to ask for help as well, to humble herself, to ask for help, to get more information, so that she is able to tackle whatever challenges that she was facing. And the third thing is she also then layer it with her own values. After getting all the data, she will layer it with her own values and her own intuition to make a decision based on it.
Mm.
So she still have a voice in this case, but she also take into account all the data points and to be able to solve problems that way. So that's how she leaned into her turning imposter syndrome into a strength. And she's not ashamed about it. She talks about it very publicly.
Yep.
And so that's another thing that a letter writer can consider to turn it into a strength. Cool. Anything else you think we should be able to give some pointers? Anything else for the letter writer to consider before I kind of like wrap up some of these key points?
No, I mean, yeah, I think we covered quite a fair bit.
Okay, so let me try to quickly summarize it for the letter writer to some action points. The first thing is for the letter writer to consider is that it is normal for you to feel this way, to have that kind of imposter syndrome, and no matter it won't go away whether or not you're 7 or you're 70. Second thing to consider is to understand that. That you need to have the kind of, you need to, of course, allow it to happen, like what the Eileen story is. Then after that, to kind of like push through it, in this case, to reframe it, to rethink again, to have the hunger to learn, to have the empathy to say, okay, in my intent is the same, right? Nothing has changed. I love to be able to drive results, but at the same time, I also care enough for the people. Perhaps I need to revisit the method instead. So this is something which Eileen did, which also the letter writer can consider as well. And the third thing is that for the letter writer to have a deeper self-reflection, think about where is this coming from, this insecurity coming from? Is it something which is a belief system which this person have seen or experienced before when they were growing up? And to be able to deal with it in this case. And the last thing is to reframe imposter syndrome as a strength instead of a weakness. So so that is something which the letter writer can consider, and hopefully these pointers will be able to help this person out. Okay, all right, moving on to letter 2. Before that, let me get some water. All right, let's go. Letter 2. Dear Building Better Leaders, I've recently stepped into a seat at the executive table. On paper, this is everything I've worked for, but I'm wrestling with a decision that's been eating at me. We are structuring a part of the business, and one of the proposals on the table is to scale back a program that was originally designed to support women returning to the workforce. Things like flexible hours, coaching, and reintegration support. The data shows it is not profitable enough. I've been told we need to cut what's nice to have so we can focus on growth. But on the other hand, this touches something deeply personal. Supporting women in the workplace has always been a core value for me. I know what it's like to be overlooked because you're a mother, or to lose momentum in your career because of caregiving. Letting this program go feels like I'm turning my back on something that matters, not just professionally, but personally. I'm torn. If I push back too hard, I risk being seen as emotional or biased. If I stay quiet, I'm complicit in dismantling something that reflects the very values I've championed. How do I reconcile what's right for the business and what feels right in my gut? This is tough. Clearly, this person is a senior manager who's recently promoted to be at the table. And I'm just wondering, any initial thoughts when you first read this letter?
Yeah, I think this is very common, to be honest, right? Between balancing short-term decisions over long-term decisions. I mean, this is kind of how I would summarize it, right?
Okay.
Go longer-term business value, longer-term business strategy. So that's linked to technically longer-term goals. And then obviously short-term goals, which is really all about driving profits at that point in time, right? So this is, in my view, is very, very common. For me, I think to your point as well, how do we think about this question a little bit differently? I think most often than not, when we are all in C-suite, we have stakeholders and we have board members that we need to think about, which is very real, because then anyone can argue to say, but if you don't think about the short-term profits, then where got long-term?
Yeah.
Right? So I tend to want to take a more balanced approach. And I think every decision I will always kind of put a bit of a ratio, right? A mental ratio in my head. Is this decision that is, say, 80% more for short term, 20% more for long term? Or is this decision, 60% long term, 40% short term? And how do we balance that? So, but because there's not enough details in the letter around what the program is, fundamentally, based on what I'm reading, it makes sense for us to think about continuing to support this initiative. I think my advice is typically I like to go numerical, meaning if fundamentally we believe that this has value for the business on the longer term, I would always use data and facts to argue the point.
Wow.
Because at the end of it, we run a business. It cannot be based on, emotions. Emotions is one, but emotions has to be backed by data, in my view. So my advice is to go for the cost of this program to continue to run against the potential longer term impact and return for the business. What does that look like versus, say, a short term, right? And if based on the cost restructure. And is there a middle ground? Because sometimes you don't have to say, it's either or. It doesn't necessarily mean that. But it could go, maybe today the program is 100% scale. Is there opportunity given that we may need to restructure? Without losing sight of the bigger goal, how do we look at reprioritizing these programs, say maybe to a 60% scale? That will still help us to drive that, but gives us the room for immediate restructuring, I guess, room in monetary sense to ensure the business flourish first. Because if the business doesn't flourish now, then that long term is also gone. So that's how I typically would look at it. And I usually go to conversations with C-suites and boards is data driven.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you look for allies? I mean, in this case, as you research and so on, do you look for allies to kind of like back you up on top of the data?
Yes and no. I think it depends on what the situation is. I have come to learn along the journey that often than not, allies that we may have, if it comes down to numbers and profits for the business, a lot of people won't stick their neck out. It is the reality. I mean, we like to believe that we live in an idea. Sorry, I'm a bit more cynical. The earlier one, I'm a bit more positive. The reality is that there are too many stakes at play sometimes, right? And we may have allies to say we support, and in terms of how the program can get developed or supported, I think. But most often than not, when push comes to shove and the person's at a corner, they will not stick their neck out. And in the end, it is the CEO who has to stick their neck out. It is the CEO who says, this is my decision, and then I have to acknowledge the brunt that comes with it if it doesn't work. So it is also in this regard, question back to the lead, right? You gotta also have courage to ensure that you're gonna back this. And what I'm hearing is that it's very close to heart, but I would back it up with data as well. Because there's one thing so maybe I'll talk a little bit about my experience. So
Sure.
when I took over Omnicom Media Group Malaysia, it was very hard to pivot and transform mentalities that were originally there, right? In the way we treat our talents. I'm not saying we treat them bad, but just maybe like putting it at the forefront to go, times have changed and we need to rethink the way we do things, to employee policies, to thinking about how we think about expats, like transitioning expats properly when they come and join the organization and from another country. What do we do? How do we treat them? Every step of the way is a signal of how the company is. But it was very hard initially to pivot, to help the executive leadership team to understand that as simple as how our talent communicate with an expat, for example, before they even join matters. How on the first day the people walk in matters. Like all these things matters, right? So it was hard to actually change that mindset. But did I just do it in one program like that? Honestly, no. It took me years to get to where we needed to be. Bits by breaking to say if my entire program about putting talent first and investing in people and making sure that we have proper training and leadership and great experience. We call it our EVP, or our employee value proposition. It took me 3 years for the EVP to truly reach somewhere, I would say a decent place. At the beginning, it was knowing that this is the goal. We broke it down bit by bit by bit because it was also we have to run the business. There was just not enough funds. We were not big enough. We haven't grown enough to be able to extend such leeways. So it's for me, it's the same advice as well to say, yes, this big program is important, but is there opportunity for you to chunk down and start to go? How do you find that balance with profits? Because without that, so you cannot move on to business.
Wow. Thanks for also adding in your personal experience on that. I, again, I think what I'm learning from this conversation as well is, I think how we started out when I was introducing you, that you are great at straddling between the paradoxes. I think a lot of times, especially new managers, they think that it's always either or, very binary in this case, right? So if this
Yep.
cannot, then the other one is the answer in this case. But you have constantly, offered, like, what if it can have both? How does that even look like? So what if, for example, we have long term in our site, but yet let's say we also need to understand about short term. How does that look like, right? So you can look into the big picture as well as into granular as well, and I think that is something which is not said, but through your sharing and so on. I think new managers need to be able to understand as well. I think not even new managers, but generally managers need to be able to straddle both in terms of the paradoxes, to be able to see big and also look at small things. The other thing that I would like to probably add on to this letter writer is for this person to look at it as an opportunity rather than putting herself or himself into a position of like, kind of like a victim position, but more of like, okay, this is an opportunity for me, a defining opportunity for me to be able to show up, to also kind of put a stand, to make a stand in this case, right? And I think, like it or not, because this person is new in the executive table, the rest of them on the table would be also kind of, like it or not, would be judging to a certain extent, right? That's the reality of it. And I think to be able to make a stand, to make a decision, to be able to say this is how we intend to do it. I hear you. I hear about the short terms and long terms. So this is what is my plan. And to be able to also understand that even though this person may lose the battle in this case, right? That okay, let's say for example, they may just grab it out, for example, but what the impression that has been given to the rest of the executives is that, like, oh, okay, this person has a stand. This person, thought through this. I think that is important as well to build your reputation in this case, and not just to be a follower in this case, or just to to satisfy different parties and all.
Yeah.
I think that is also very important to be able to choose your battles as well, because ultimately it's
Yeah.
the war that we want to win. So
Yes.
some things you just may have to, like, okay, that's fine, but I will move on to the
Yeah.
next one.
And I think, I mean, when I saw the letter as well, I think sometimes we tell ourselves that we don't have the choice, but
Yeah.
I think we do actually,
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
said, right? So the choice is sometimes not either or. Sometimes the more courageous choice is actually finding a different ground to actually address it. And in the end, if let's say still really the decision is to can it, for example, what is the worst thing that can happen if the argument would not have been put forth? I think that is something that I also always ask myself is that what is the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is actually inaction. That's the worst thing. Because even if you take an action and that action is wrong, people will still go, okay, long, so there was an action taken or there was a voice heard. I think the next thing is, like you said, lah, right? Like the impression that's being left behind. I just probably want to do one addition is that after that, once the decision is made, what are your actions after is very important. One is your C-suite, of course, in terms of impression, but you have to communicate because then it is through your communication that you can manage the narrative and say, it is not that we have given up on our goal. It is not, this is still a priority. However, we do need to take some short-term intermediary actions right now. Please, you get what I mean? Like all these things are actions that can be taken to manage situations and will reflect better on the individual as well.
Wow. Okay. Let's come to a wrap for this letter. So what we're telling the letter writer to consider is, I think the big theme here is about short-term versus long-term. In this case, to understand that from at a C-suite level, these are things we should consider because without thinking about short-term, there's not going to be a long-term, right? So, and how this letter writer can consider in bringing the case to the table is to back it up with data and facts, right? Versus emotions. So I think that's really important. And how would that look like? For example, once with data and facts, how would the middle ground looks like? Is it about scaling it down? Is it about chunking into smaller pieces? In this case, like what Eileen has shared, for the program, for the employee program. In this case, it was not overnight, but it was across 3 years, right? So and not, I think what that shows, especially that story, shows that the focus and is still there. In terms of, it is still there. That hasn't forgotten. It's just that it is now operating in a different way. Probably like 3 years or 2 years and so on. I think that's very important. And the other thing is also to tell the letter writer is to have the mindset of that we do have a choice. It's not about feeling backed up in a corner and you have no choice. All of us have a choice, right? Hence, that's why we work in an agency. Ta-da! Anyway, sorry. So yes, all of us have agency, right? So we need to be able to understand that, and it's not a question about either or, but learning how to operate using A and D instead of either or in this case, right? So if both things happen, how would that look like? So it's something for especially managers to look into, and once whatever decision has been made, it's also important then for this letter writer to be able to communicate it to the cause that she was championing, in this case, to communicate it clearly, to say why this has happened and why we took these decisions, so that the rest of the people would understand it rather than just keeping it so-called under wraps in this case. Okay, did I miss out anything?
Nope, all good.
All right. Moving on to the last letter for today. This is a short letter, but I think it's a very powerful letter. Dear Building Better Leaders, I'm leading what most people would call a dream team. They're fast, sharp, reliable, and we have built a strong reputation in the company. But it's starting to feel like we're victims of our own success. Because we deliver, we keep getting more work from upper management. Because we never complain, no one thinks we're under pressure. The team won't say it outright, but I can see it. Fatigue, lack of motivation, passive-aggressive comments like, of course it's us again, right? So I feel it too, but I don't want to look like I'm making excuses. How do I advocate for our bandwidth without damaging our reputation as the A team? So before I pass the time to you, I think I just want to contextualize this for the letter writer. You're not alone. This is the very classic competence trap that all of us go through, even if you're an individual contributor as well. because you don't complain, you get more job, and because you get more job, you don't want to come across as incompetent, so you just take it on, in this case. And I think a lot of times as a manager before, and I was guilty of it many times, I don't take care of my A team that much because the A team can work, right? They don't complain. So in fact, I spend a lot of time trying to take care of the B team and even the C teams, right? In this case, and because of that, the A team will resent because hey, I'm actually sacrificing for you, and you're taking care of this B team and C team, which they're not even interested to be there. I'm not too sure why are you spending so much time with them, right? So that is something which could be a blind spot for most managers themselves, that they spend, I mean, it's only natural you want to help those who cannot perform in this case, which I can understand, but they forget that there is this thing called an A team. So just wanted to kind of like bookmark this in terms of what a competence trap is all about. But over to you. Any thoughts for this letter writer, Eileen?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think in my view, it's about having that conversation, and again, right? Like, I mean, it's not about going. Firstly, I think that you gotta remove this mindset of complaining, lah. Like, or if I'm gonna raise anything, it's a complaint. It's not a complaint. Like, we are all working, we are all adults, we are having conversation. I mean, that's one reframe I definitely want to go. I think that is similar when people also give me this feedback, like, oh, I don't want to give feedback to the person because I don't want to say bad things. I'm like, huh? But if the person don't hear it, like, how on earth would they learn, right? And all of that. So for me, it's we gotta reframe this mindset. It's about sitting down and having a conversation with the senior team or his or her boss to say, look, I appreciate and I'm very excited about all this work that we are doing and da 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 da. However, I am noticing this, right? And if even more, if you have some data to support you, great. Like for example, we are falling behind on some of our deadlines, or we might be, I observe that the quality of the work, that we are delivering now to other clients are, say, being impacted. My team is falling sick, for example, X number of hours. I mean, again, data being data oriented, right? When you put something that's a bit more objective in front of seniors, I mean, the no senior I would go say, oh, I don't believe your data. I mean, I don't think anybody will ever say that. It's like, huh?
I don't believe you.
Yeah, nobody will actually say that. But when you tend to have conversations that are too emotional, then people think that the emotions are overtaking the conversations rather than
Yes.
an objective conversation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that would be, to be honest, firstly, reframe. It's not a complaint, right? But second, it's about just conversation. And then backed it by data. And then the third thing I think most often than not, I do see sometimes managers don't do this, is talk about the impact to the business.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because for us as seniors, that's what we that's every night that we go to bed, wake up, think about the business,
Yeah.
wake up, you think about
Yeah.
the business, right?
Yeah.
So what does the impact have on this team now has on the business? And if this team say crumble or don't deliver or start to have
Yes.
issues, the impact to the business. I think that those are the, I would say, adult conversations we need to have rather than just say or complaining why you always give us more work. Da, 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 da. That's not the right conversation to have.
Okay. So, I mean, same points, right? First, don't complain or reframe it. It's not really complaining, it's about having conversation. I think a lot of time, just from the last letters that we replied as well, we talked about backing it up with data, right? And I like what you say about impact, because ultimately that's what the senior leaders are. That's what keeping them awake at night. So I think you're right. So a lot of times, when I received complaints last time, when I was leading a team, a lot of times it sounds like complaints, literally.
Yeah.
Oh, is that so okay? So, but I've still received those kind of I would say very objective, to say that okay, Kausern, this is I just want to let you know that the team is currently overworked, right? Overwork here means what, right? So this is what these are like for example, we have been missing deadlines and so on. Now, understand that we are actually taking care of the biggest client that we have at this point in time. Now, if we don't do anything about it, we may lose this client, right? This client is giving us, I don't know, like 5 million a year or something like that. Where are we going to get another 5 million if we're going to lose this client? So when they have such conversations like that, immediately it switches from emotions to objective.
Yeah.
Then I think then say, okay, you got my attention. Let's figure it how to figure this out, right? Because if not, then it sounds very emotional in this case, right? So I think that part of the not a lot of managers, unfortunately, will want to be able to dig deeper to say, look, I hear you, but what is the impact? They don't. Most of the time, when they start to hear complaints, they will kind of like deal with it, that kind of thing,
Correct.
right? Yeah. So
Then
when
it feels like just a sounding session, like just a sounding board. And then they go, yeah, I hear you, and we'll keep that in mind. But then the next thing when something else in the business happens, it's the last thing they keep in mind because they have to
yeah,
think about the business. I
yeah,
think, just maybe for me, one more thing is sometimes what you discover is if you have an adult conversation about situations, you will realize that maybe senior management might open up and tell you more about what you may not be seeing, for example, right? And maybe the senior management person might also say, actually, the reason why I might be handing more of the work to you is because I know I can depend on you guys because this other team is some challenges. And you might actually come to possibly an alternative solution. Maybe let's say the other team is challenged, but then maybe another option of resolution could be, hey, you know what? We don't mind coaching them to get them
right.
to speed. You get what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
if you
yeah.
don't have those conversations, you may not know what is in your boss's head and what are the problems they are dealing with as well, because they can't go around telling people all the problems that they are facing, right? Yeah.
I think this is something which is um, very common, especially when I was telling my juniors at a time, right? To say that if you got any beef with anyone, you need to be able to speak to that person directly and not speak to someone else because you don't know what is in that person's mind. You don't know if you don't know what's in the person's mind, how are you going to change anything if you don't know what's in the person's mind, right?
Yeah.
And the only way to
And you
unlock that
cannot
is
assume.
to yeah, exactly. But most of the time, they choose not to. They choose to go out lunch with someone else and to tell their own stories about someone else. And then both of them tell each other, convince each other to quit the job. Um, so I think yes, you're right.
It's like
The
Chinese whispers lah. The more you keep talking,
yeah,
talking, talking, you talk until you believe that that is actually the reality.
the
Maybe
reality.
it's not.
Yes, agree. Um, so I think let's get into before we close this, get into something a bit more practical for this person, like some suggestions on also how to say no to some of these projects which is coming in, right? In this case, right? So I think by having conversations, that's great. I think also the letter writer can also consider to some tips and tricks in terms of like possibly saying yes but so rather than saying no, right? So yes but, so what does that look like? So that means, for example, if I take it on, yes, but let's say if I just do the planning bit but the execution done by someone else, is this possible or not, right? So that is also not just taking it all as it is. Sometimes some leaders, they just pass it down because they just need something to get done. And I think for an A team or an A player, they will think that, oh, I need to make this perfect. But actually, maybe what the leader wants, senior leader wants, is just something which is not perfect. I mean, I'm not saying not perfect. I mean, it's just instead of 10 out of 10, I just need a 6 out of 10 for this. So it's able to also clarify to say, so boss, understand. So you're looking at 10 out of 10 or you're looking 6 out of 10? So from that, you can say, okay, sure, I got it. I've got a previous deck which I can use or whatever. But a lot of times we don't clarify with our bosses. We think that, when the boss were to cough and say, oh, I think these walls would look nice in red. And next thing you know, you spend the whole evening paint the whole wall red in this case. But it's just a passing remark. Yeah. So these are some of the practical things I think that the letter writer can consider. But more importantly, let's quickly recap, right? Anything else to add on before I recap?
No, I think, yeah.
Okay, so what the letter writer should reframe are a few things. Number one, not to come across as a complainer, but to look at every such moments to be an opportunity to have conversations with the higher ups in this case, right? So to reframe that, and when we have conversations with our bosses, it's very important not to come across as emotional, but to be able to present our case backed up with data in this case. And data here means what? So means, for example, what does the impact, the consequences to the business if these things were to continue, right? So that's important. And also, and be surprised that when you have such conversations with your bosses, they may be revealing certain things to you which you may not even know. And then because of that you have more empathy of why that you're actually doing more. And because of that, sometimes creativity will be sparked, new things can come out. Like for example, I can help the other team, or maybe I can coach the other team, or I can understand where you're coming from. So these are things which you call it the adult conversation. I think this is important. Just one thing before we close. I think a lot of times juniors may not want to be able to, not juniors, but kind of like middle managers, they do not want to bring this up to their bosses because our bosses are busy, they don't understand and so on, right? So as much as what we are telling this letter writer now is to have courage to have this kind of adult conversation. But I'm just wondering, from a senior C-suite position, what can a C-suite person do to encourage such conversations from the middle managers?
Um, I, to be honest, Kausern, I don't really know. I think it is really in demeanor, and how ones carry themselves, right? Because I often hear this thing about, oh, we can create psychological safety. But no matter what, right? I still think that people won't unless you are being transparent yourself. Like you are being open and being transparent to a degree, right? We always cannot divulge like
Of course,
business
of course.
related stuff. But like if you come across as genuine and being really open, then I think that breaks a bit of the invisible barrier already, right? And then you can try to create programs. So, for example, right now in Malaysia, Omnicom Media Group Malaysia kind of started it before I moved on. We started what we call lunch with leads. So the exco members, you know, so we had people who write in like who wants to be part of this program and which exco member they pick to have a conversation with. And we do that. And so I think that helps. And honestly, this I mean, it's not a very it's not similar scenarios, but I would say similar solutions, which is to have the courage to have the conversation. And I was quite happy because recently I caught up with the person, and she was telling me about a problem, and she's like, but I'm already going to plan to speak to my manager. And
Wow. Yeah.
and from the first time, when I met her, and then to where it was like first time she was crying, and then she's like you can physically see the discomfort as I'm trying to say you need to have the conversation.
Yeah.
The physical discomfort that was appearing in her face, to now say, I know I already scheduled a conversation.
Wow.
And I paused her there and I said, firstly, did you realize what the progress you have made? And then she was like, huh? No, like it didn't dawn on her what I was saying. And I said that the fact that you're going to have the conversation and you've already made the action to do that is a progress from where you were, like so difficult, like so afraid to have conversation, to have now come to realize that I will have the conversation. I mean, having said that, actually, a couple of months back, she already had the conversation. It's just there are new problems that are emerging. But the fact that she went past that hurdle, it has dawned on her that fear is actually it's not like fear is bigger in our mind than it is in reality.
And with that, we will end today's conversation. I've learned a lot from the stories, and I'm sure that all of you listeners here watching this learn a lot from the stories on top of all the pointers to do and so on. I think the stories are the one that will always stick. So thank you very much, Eileen, for spending
Thank you for
some
having me.
time with us. Knowing how busy, but it's not an excuse, because I do know that you would like to be able to continue to impact young leaders as well. That's why I really appreciate you for intentionally carving this time out for this conversation. So for the rest of you, if you come to this part of the conversation, you know that you're sat through a very long conversation, but you're still here, and I really appreciate it. So please comment, please like, please engage with this piece of content, because the more you do it, it will go further to the people who needs to hear this, especially young leaders who need a lot of support and a lot of structure in this case. So with that, thank you very much. Continue to write in these letters and we will address them. With that,
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye.
Building Better Leaders with Kausern Hieu podcast is the advice column for leaders today. Produced and edited by me, Susan Yong. Got a leadership challenge at work? Send us a letter today. More information in the description box.